Okay, cool. Yeah, so I can give you an example. So hypothetically, so let's say, because I've had people actually give me this analogy before. They say, okay, you have two jars. Which one has supernatural in it? And it's like, okay, well, that tells you that you actually don't understand what we're talking about here. So let's say you have two jars that are known to have nothing in them but air, right?
Okay.
And then one of them spontaneously ends up getting a fire that burns in it. And then when you look inside, you actually find material that actually is capable of producing fire. Would you say that the jar that had that happen in it, that is an example of something that is supernatural based on what you just said?
If it's defined that way, yeah.
Okay, yeah, because we don't normally observe, obviously, two jars having nothing in them, and then all of a sudden a fire starts in one of them, and then somehow material that wasn't supposed to be in there, that wasn't in there, just got in there somehow, right? So that would be. So you agree that would be an example, if that happened, of something that is supernatural?
Correct.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so where I kind of agree with you on what you said about the natural is because, well, I know that everyone has their own belief system, but it's specifically speaking along the lines of the Bible. When someone becomes saved, they become what the Bible says, a new creation. And it says the old things have passed away, the new things, behold, all things have been made new. So what essentially happens, you could even argue from a physical perspective, is that someone's brain state changes to where they no longer have the same perspective of life that they priorly used to have. And this, of course, would be with regards to sin, what the Bible calls sin. And their life is evidence, so to speak, that change has taken place. Would you say that is evidence for someone who claims to be a Christian under the definition of what the Bible says?
I don't, that was a lot of words. I don't think I understand what you're trying to say.
Okay, so let me put it this way. So you have people who can, over a course of time, they can make life decisions in their life that basically they go from one brain state to another, whereas before they used to think these ways about certain things. Like, for example, I've actually seen this. There are some people who have taken like a pornography detox kind of course thing, and people even who weren't Christians did this, and it took some time. But basically, they did this to kind of stop watching pornography so much, and they reported that their life had changed. They reported that they had what they considered to be a healthier view of relationships and women and such. But this took time, right? So that is something that can be done through what we'd consider to be a natural means.
Sure.
So now let's say that you have someone who has been living a life, for example, where they're addicted to pornography and they have, these thoughts about women, and they hear the gospel message and they do what the gospel message says, in which the Bible says that they have repented of their sin and they put their faith in the accomplished work of Jesus. And this change happens immediately. Given my two jar examples, would you say that constitutes a supernatural experience?
I don't know, because you have other examples where people are healed of drug addictions using different religious practices. So these things, same thing, and pornography happens, same thing. So, and I think that can be explained by the human psyche. I don't think that's explained by a deity.
Okay, sure, but the human psyche, as we know, is what would, in a sense, kind of be something that's considered outside of the natural.
No, we can observe that. We know what's going on inside of a human brain. We know about the chemical interactions inside of a human brain. It's not supernatural.
Well, you can see them.
Yeah.
Well, you can see the chemical reactions.
So it's not abnormal to be able to mold someone's mind with emotion and, influence. I think most of us probably have to influence other people throughout the day in our day jobs.
Right, but even with influence, that takes time too. When you have something like,
that's why it's like a 12-week course.
This does happen sometimes. Was that sorry?
That's why it's like a 12-week course. Like if you're a drug addiction, you go to a clinic and it takes 12 weeks to get you clean off the drugs and get your mind right.
Sure. Well, but going back to my my jar analogy, I can go pick up sulfur or whatever and stick it in a jar and light a match and put it in there, and I accomplish the same task that we experience. But the difference between one and the other is that a fire combusted inside of the jar with no known elements that were inside of the jar in the other example. So yeah, you can replicate something, but I would say that the supernatural experience or instance would be something that occurs, you could say, in an instant, at least relatively speaking, compared to the fact that you could have otherwise done this by your own means. Because yeah, I can stick the same ingredients in a jar, but you're going to see me do that. But as far as starting in a jar that you and I are both looking at with no known cause, I mean, that is obviously not the same thing as someone else sticking the ingredients in a jar and starting the fire themselves. Would you agree?
I'm confused at what we're trying to prove here.
I'm trying to explain to you how we would differentiate the difference between something that would constitute, or at least be more along the lines of a supernatural experience, versus something that you can simply just duplicate with an extended amount of time. You know, like, okay, so for example, assuming it happened, right? Jesus turned water into wine, apparently according to the Bible. Okay, can anyone turn water into wine? Technically, yes, but it takes time. It's not something that you can just do within a matter of minutes or seconds or however long it took. It seemed to be, relatively speaking, according to what the Bible said, in an instant. Jesus turned water into wine. It's almost as if he isolated, you know, these jars because he's God, and he got the ingredients from nature, put them in the jar or whatever, and he isolated these jars or this water to basically kind of pass through time, but in a short amount of time. Yeah, you can technically replicate that because anyone can make wine, but it's not the fact that you can replicate it. It's the fact that according to the natural laws that exist in nature, you can't make wine within a matter of minutes.
So what about,
it takes years?
What about, David Copperfield made the Statue of Liberty disappear within an instant?
I have not seen that.
It's on YouTube. You can watch videos of it.
Okay, is David Copperfield claiming to have divine miraculous powers? He claims to be an entertaining magician.
No, it's a magician's act, but how do you know that he's not getting that power from a supernatural source?
Well, he could be. I mean, I'm just saying, even if you look at the Bible, let's take Moses, for example, right? What did he do? He supposedly turned his staff into a snake by the power of God. What happened afterwards? Do you remember the story?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I'm just saying though, but
replicated that.
But we know a magician can make Statue of Liberty disappear, right? And we know that he's doing a trick.
Exactly.
So how do we know that Jesus turning water to wine wasn't a trick?
Because the people drank it and they said it was the best wine that they'd ever had.
Yeah, but you also had people in the audience, and David Copperfield made that Statue of Liberty disappear.
So we're acknowledging that the potential for the supernatural exists then.
Well, between the two. Now, I don't think that David Copperfield is supernatural by any means. I think that it was obviously a manipulation. Okay. But we have other magicians too that have done tricks. Let's take a specific example, like cutting someone in half. This is a trick that we today know how works. But if we went back 50 or 100 years and did that trick, people would say that it was supernatural. We know that it's not. So the people at that time, just like in Jesus's time, were both convinced that it was a supernatural event. Right?
Right.
So, but now we know that it wasn't supernatural. It was a trick.
Well, I can think of a lot of good reasons. So we live in a day where people have practiced and spent their time investing in basically what is known as sleight of hand. We know that sleight of hand is a thing. Now,
it's not new.
I get where you're coming from. Huh?
Sleight of hand isn't new.
Well, okay.
It's a much more acceptable position in my mind to think if the water to wine story wasn't just a story and it actually happened, that people were deceived, because I know that humans are poor receptors of information, and we also like to be swoon, and we could, if we believed. I mean, you see these preachers on TV all the time knocking people over because the people think that the pastor has magical powers.
Oh yeah, I know, and I fully
the human is at fault.
What's the word?
The human is the problem.
What's that?
But I do appreciate you calling in. I'm going to try and take some other calls, though. I'll let you wrap up.
Okay, so I just want to say this. So I think this is what I would say. I think that when you look at the specific instances of the things that Jesus did, it's not even comparable. I mean, how do you explain a leper being cured of leprosy in an instant? How do you explain Jesus raising a dead person? How do you explain Jesus bringing a girl who was pronounced dead, although Jesus did say she was only sleeping, she could have been in a coma or something? How do you explain him bringing her back to life? How do you explain his resurrection? I mean, for example, that guy was definitely dead, according to everything that we know about Roman history and about the story. I mean, I'm just saying, you can write it off as some kind of comparison to what we have today. But when you actually look at the miracles themselves and what actually happened, or the multiplying of the bread and fish, I mean, I would argue that you would be very hard pressed to actually give an explanation that is even comparable to the type of known sleight of hand and camera tricks that we have today.
Well, so here's another possibility. The events never happened.
That's a possibility.
That would be much more logical. And then later on, through word of mouth, people added or embellished stories, much like other religions have, be it Greek mythology or Horus or Egyptian stuff or Islam, whatever. Word of mouth travels and things got added in and adjusted, and voila, so, one fish turned into 1,000 fish, the resurrection turned into that, but we could get into that all night. So, but I do appreciate you calling in.
Sure. Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I would say that there are stories in a book, and that those stories in a book don't prove that they're true. It doesn't. Stories in a book don't equate to real. I don't believe necessarily that just because it's in a book, it's real. Otherwise, you could just say that this is real. And human experience is not a good teller. As like with the David Copperfield example, these people thought they saw the Statue of Liberty removed. Now, I know that's a trick. You know that's a trick. No one believes that David Copperfield is a god. Who the hell did you take calls? That's my real number. It's my real number. All right. Here's our next guy. Give him a call. It's right there. 678-506-5108.
Hello.
What's up?
Hey, okay.
So before we get started, I got to ask you some questions because you didn't tell me in text.
Okay.
Where are you calling?
I'm agnostic.
Oh,
so
that's fine. Where are you calling from?
Kansas City. Wait, what do you mean? Like, oh, I turned off my call ID because I was being.
No. That's not it. No, I'm just letting it, where you're from. I'm from Atlanta. You're from Kansas City. How old are you?
Oh, I'm 19.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So I just so people know who we're talking to.
Okay. So I fully accepted myself as an agnostic. I've grown up in a religious household, Christian like you,
mm-hmm.
and I something in my heart still kind of believes in God, which is why I consider myself to be agnostic. But I think that's just the fear of other people saying, oh, you're going to burn in hell, and maybe just those traumatizing moments from when I was younger.
Sure.
But I was curious to know how you fully became an atheist, or like your story. Because I have so many research from what I've done for the past few months. So many things in reality have contradicted the Bible. I had a friend who was a part of the LGBTQ plus community
Sure.
who committed suicide after coming out to her conservative religious parents.
Sure.
And she genuinely was attracted to females.
Sure.
This is something that she was. It wasn't a phase. Like,
Right.
she had been feeling like this for like years, and it's just like I have to agree with atheists when they say, you know, the Bible is just made up in a way. I mean, I remember I was watching, I think his name was Bill Maher.
Yeah.
And he said, what was it? I don't know. It was an atheist, popular atheist on a TV show. And he was like, well, these were the same guys, you know, the prophets who didn't know what germs were, or something as simple as that.
Yeah.
You know, and
They think so they could inherit a house.
You said what?
They thought disease could inherit a house, like a house could be what caused disease.
Yeah. There's so many things in science that contradict the Bible. Like, for example, one thing in the Bible, like thinking, for example. Scientists have, like, researchers have shown that thinking is not effective. Like, that's not an effective way to discipline a child.
Right.
Yet that's what the Bible says is an appropriate way to discipline a child. I don't know if you were spanked, but I was spanked hard as fuck.
Yeah.
Maybe traumatized, not saying that my parents were bad people.
Right. No, not at all.
Intentions, but just kind of scary, you know. So many things have contradicted. It seems like as Christians, it's hypocritical because they always believe in science. We know that molesting a child is bad because it gives them, you know, it messes with their brain, and when they grow older, they'll be confused about sex, and it traumatizes them. And the Bible doesn't really talk about molestation. We all know that. As humans, we all know molestation is bad.
Right.
If anything is against the Bible or like contradicts the Bible, that's when Christians are like, no, I'll do this because that's what God says.
Right.
Well, you know, there are so many, I mean.
Except for Matthew. They don't like Matthew because in Matthew, it says to sell all your possessions and then come and give the money to the poor and then come follow me. That's what Jesus says. They like to make excuses for that one.
I'm not doing that.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm not doing that.
Yeah, they don't want to do that. You know, that part's too much, you know.
I've worked hard, so support, nothing against the poor,
yeah.
But I'm working hard.
But I can't think, but you think about it, if Christians truly took that message to heart, there would not be any, there would be no poverty in America.
Some people do that literally. And I'm just so confused with Christianity in general. Like, there's so many denominations. Like, y'all just being extra. Like,
there's 30,000.
Believe that. Just call yourself a believer, but there's Baptism, Lutheranism, Catholicism, all this extra.
Those are the main ones, too. There's some fringe stuff. You know, here in Georgia, where I'm at, you got the snake handling people. That's another denomination. They handle live venomous snakes. Oh, yeah. You can watch some videos on YouTube of it. They will be dancing around with snakes in their hands. And it's because of certain Bible verses that talked about not being affected by venom of snakes. So they think that they can be protected from snake venom.
Right. And I just which is probably, you know, you probably can't be protected by snake venom.
No.
You know, if it's poisonous, you will get attacked. There's a chance, you know, a chance that you won't. And also, I don't want to put race into this because I don't know if you're one of those, no offense, I don't know if you're one of those white people who are like, all lives matter. I don't know if you're that, but I'm Black.
Sure.
I'm Haitian. I don't know if you know that island, but I know you live in Florida, so I don't know if you're familiar with Haitian people, Dominican, Cuban, Puerto Rican, all those Caribbeans that live over there in Florida.
I have some employees of mine that are Puerto Rican from New York.
Wait, you live in
Atlanta. I'm in Atlanta.
Okay, you live in Atlanta. My bad. I thought you said Florida. Okay.
Yeah. No.
Okay. Well, if you know the history of African slaves,
yes,
they were spiritual at first.
Yes.
Then Christianity was forced onto Black people.
Absolutely.
So I contradict that. It's weird to say, you know, if you're not religious, you have no moral, you know, ground, and it's stupid. But I mean, there's facts throughout history that even if you were religious, you were doing some pretty fucked up things. You were raping people, enslaving, owning. I mean, in the 60s, white people who claimed to be Christian, who claimed to be followers of Christ, still believed in segregation.
Yeah. And
so, you know, it's kind of crazy to say. I'm sorry.
No, and I was going to say that you know, I don't get to approach that subject the same way because I'm not Black. But from an external perspective, when I see it, what I don't understand is why somebody would practice the religion that was forced on their ancestors.
Right. And I feel like as a Black person, as someone who is Haitian, in Haiti, voodoo is very highly practiced.
Yeah.
Haiti, I mean, if you know, Haiti was the first Black country to gain its independence from slavery. And a lot of Haitians credit the ancestors and spirits that they used to fight the French, because the French tried to force them into converting into Christianity.
Right.
And my parents are Christian, so my ancestors obviously were easily converted into Christianity. But it's just, as a Black person, because people automatically assume I'm African American. So when they look at me, they don't think I speak any other language.
Yeah.
Trilingual. I'm part Dominican, part Haitian. So it's like there's a stigma. Christianity is so embedded in the Black community that it's like, if you say that you're atheist out loud, it's like, no, they will beat it back in you that, you believe in Christ. So I tried to hide my atheism. I can't watch movies the same anymore without hearing like predominantly Black films, without seeing Christ.
Right. It's everywhere.
The foundation of the Black community.
Well, and I think it has to do with the church, because for Black people, it's a little bit different when it comes to the church, because the church isn't just the church. It's also the central component of the community. The church is a community center. So
even in hip hop that degrades women, even in hip hop music, and I listen to hip hop, I like hip hop. They even, Christian lyrics, only God can judge me. Tupac, he's like, only God can judge me, while also singing about sin. But that was just him.
Yeah.
As a Black person. So I don't know. And also one thing that also just was like, I'm probably agnostic, maybe atheist, is the fact that during this whole pandemic, when there was a pastor, I don't know what state it was in, but a pastor decided to defy CDC guidelines.
That's Florida.
And he opened his church. Okay, probably, of course, Florida, because that's the most crazy state.
Yep.
But a pastor decided to defy CDC guidelines, and he opened his church. He said, because we're praising God, God will protect us. He ended up dying. Yeah.
There's like 80 people in the congregation got sick and 2 or 3 died.
Right.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Even it's just like, I feel like everything that we've done as humans is not by the grace of God, but I think it's just us as humans evolving.
Personal work.
Slavery was over after hundreds of years. Slavery was over. All of that. We finally respect women a little bit, kind of.
Yeah.
And it's just like there are people. Like one thing I hate about Christians is like they're so grounded in their beliefs, and that's the same with I think all religious people. But it's just like, if you think about it from a secular point of view, why is it that there are poor Christians, successful Christians? There are poor Muslims, successful Muslims. I don't think it has anything to do with your faith. I think it just has to do with the fact that you become successful in life in general.
Right. Yeah.
Like I got good grades in high school. Do I credit that to God? No, that's just me. Just
hard work.
I know religious people, religious high school kids who were successful in their classwork, and I know religious kids who didn't give a fuck about their classwork.
Right.
That's just us.
Yeah. Humans are individuals like that.
Yeah, and it's just everything in society just seems there's no God. Maybe there is a higher being,
sure,
but I don't know a God that just sits up there and just throws random hurricanes to the Caribbean
that we can predict.
Florida's currently evacuating. Or we're already going through a pandemic. I just don't know who just. I feel like they're playing tic-tac-toe. I don't know.
Well, and it's if you read the Bible, though, the Bible says that weather is from God. And so if weather is from God and we can predict hurricanes with relative accuracy weeks out. So are we predicting the outcome of a God? Like, are we predicting his moves? It's kind of odd. But to answer let me answer your original question, and then I'll let you have the last word. So because you asked like why or how I found myself to be an atheist and what happened. So I grew up Christian, Catholic, and I was very passionate about the faith. Went through high school. I went through a non-denominational high school where I learned about all those denominations you talked about and discovered in my own mind that I thought that Catholicism was the correct denomination. It wasn't until I got a little bit older and I started studying the Bible and started reading the word and trying to figure out how I know right, what is right and what aren't things right, that I discovered that the book was not the be all end all. and that it had a lot of flaws, and those flaws were answered through human means. So I got to the point to where I realized that Christianity isn't right. Maybe it's a different religion, but until I know, I don't know. So it was really just allowing myself to say, I don't know. And you default to atheist. It's just what you are when you don't have a religion. If you don't believe in a God, then you're an atheist. If you're agnostic, it just means you don't know or don't claim to know whether or not there is or not is not a God. Atheist is I don't believe, like I don't have a belief in a God. So right now, since I don't believe in any given God, that makes me an atheist. And because I claim not to know, that makes me an agnostic atheist. So those deal with two different things. Atheism is an answer to a question. Do you believe in a God? Yes or no. If you say no, you're atheist. If you say yes, you're theist. The other answer would be, do you claim to know there is or isn't a God? Yes to that makes you Gnostic. No makes you agnostic. So you can be an agnostic theist. I think my parents are agnostic theists because they believe in a God, but they don't claim to know that a God exists. They just believe.
Okay.
But I'll let you have the last word, and then I'll move on to the next caller.
Well, I came out to my sister, who was very open. She considers herself to be Christian, but I came out to her, and she was very loving and accepting.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't come out to my mom yet. I don't plan on coming out to my mom, but
right.
It's just, I think it's just society in general. And maybe there is, maybe there's not. That's what I'm claiming at this moment until I do further research. But one thing that really got to me was sex trafficking.
Yes.
I was
yes.
like, there's probably no, this can't be possible. It's like, and then people are going to say, oh, that's just Satan. Anything bad in this world is Satan. Well, Satan's doing a pretty good job, overpowering the earth. If everything that contradicts the Bible is like of the devil. For y'all to claim that there is a God that is all powerful and he can destroy the devil, why is it that the earth is currently not living in harmony right now? Like wars, poverty. It's just, I think everything is just us as humans.
Yep. Well, I appreciate your call. I appreciate it. I wish you the best of luck, and I'm sorry to hear about your friend.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for your
Yep, no problem.
Yeah.
Bye.
All right. Thanks.
And I think that just goes, we got another phone call. Who is it? It's not me.
Hello.
How are you?
Hey, Gus. How are you? I'm
doing
good,
well.
Thank you.
So this is our friend from New York.
Hi, I'm Stephanie.
Stephanie. So what's going on? What do you want to talk about?
Okay, so I have a question for you.
Okay.
When you say you're an atheist, do you mean that you, without a doubt, say that there is no God?
No, I would consider that to be an anti-theist.
Okay. So as an atheist, can you just define it for me from your perspective? Please?
So I do not believe in a God currently, but I do not claim to know whether or not a God does or does not exist.
Okay. If you found something, let's say you were an astronaut traveling through outer space with a bunch of other astronauts.
Okay.
And you land on a planet, let's say Alpha Centauri, and you find marks on the wall.
Sure.
What would lead you to assume, what pieces of evidence would lead you to assume that those marks might have been the result of an intelligent being? Not necessarily have proof that they were a result of an intelligent being, but give you enough evidence or enough of an assumption to assume that it could or probably was created by another intelligent being.
That's a good question. So we're on another planet. We find some markings that we think are from an intelligent being. So
what would lead you to assume it's from an intelligent being?
I would say something probably mathematical would be one way that I would assume it's from a human being.
Okay, so something that is a pattern that perhaps you wouldn't find in nature, or a pattern that is perhaps
not necessarily a pattern, but like so for example, when we sent probes into outer space, like the Voyager probes, on those probes we attached records, the gold records that had contained audio, and also drawings that have instructions on, our location. That would lead me to believe that those items are from I'm doing air quotes, intelligent being.
Okay. So do you believe that all things in nature have the capacity to be expressed mathematically?
I think so. Yeah. I would say that most, if not every, mathematics governs everything that we do.
Okay.
So I would say yes.
Okay. Do you think that humans have the ability to actually create anything, or as per the law of conservation, and do you think that humans actually ever create anything, or do they just discover and stumble upon new things, or discover things through trial and error?
What do you mean by create? Like out of nothing?
Yeah, like human beings.
Like snap their fingers and have a material pop in front of them?
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
So human beings essentially discover things. There's no way for a human or anything in the universe to create something else. It's basically just a bunch of stumbling upon things or having an idea, putting it into thought, putting it into practice, doing some trial and error and discovering something, right?
To an extent, I would say that, we have also not observed things just kind of popping into existence. So yeah.
Sure. Okay. So if mathematics is simply a language that humans can use to understand, and essentially, if mathematics can be translated into English, for instance, through proofs, or if you stumbled upon a random alien language, which we could probably figure out a way to decode. So essentially, if everything in the universe can be translated from algorithmic-like patterns in nature, that when a certain condition is met, for example, for life to exist, a condition would have had to be met for the first living cells to sprout on Earth, right? So kind of like the computer language. So what we essentially do is we translate algorithms in nature into math, which can then be translated into English through proofs, which can then be translated into computer code. So essentially, everything that we do as humans is discovering other things, right? Does that maybe give us enough circumstantial evidence that there may be a builder behind both the building blocks and algorithmic-like patterns and conditions which break those patterns and allow new algorithmic-like patterns to branch off? Do you think these little bits of circumstantial pieces of evidence give us enough information to possibly have a reason to take a leap of faith that there may be a creator?
Possibly have a reason that there might be a creator, yes. But it doesn't
Okay,
give me a reason to say, yes, there is a creator. It doesn't move me from 0 to 1.
Okay, so let's say if at 10 there definitely is a God.
Okay.
And at 0,
let's say negative 10.
there's definitely, or at 1, there definitely isn't a God, right? Would you say that you're a solid 5, or given that there's some circumstantial evidence that could lead to the support of intelligence, to the support of the concept of intelligent design, that you're probably not at a 5, but maybe at like a 5.5 or a 6?
So if we start with 10 being I believe in a God, and negative 10 being I don't believe in a God, I'm at a 0.
Right.
I'm dead center.
Okay.
I'm not negative or positive.
Even if there's enough circumstantial evidence to lead you to believe that the thought process behind the idea of intelligent design actually makes perfect logical sense?
It doesn't make perfect logical sense to me, at least.
Okay, so why not?
Because I don't see the evidence of a logical design. I see it. You may say, so for example, people say things like that the Earth is the exact distance from the sun that we need to thrive. And therefore it was placed there. And that therefore means that it was designed that way. Whereas I look at it as there are planets all over this universe and billions and trillions upon trillions of planets. So there is a likelihood that one of those planets is going to be in the right zone, and that's the one that we're on because it's in the right zone, not because it was designed to be in that right zone. I also don't think that the human body is a great example of intelligent design, nor nature in general. There's a lot of things that are not designed logically, in my opinion. So I could see a designer or a God figure creating this universe and then being hands off, and the natural processes that we observe and the way life came about had nothing to do with the actual deity. It had everything to do with just the way the rules were set up, so to speak.
Absolutely, I agree.
But I don't know that. You can have a theory and I can have a theory, but at the end of the day, there's still just going to be theories with absolutely no evidence.
You're absolutely right. But would you agree that there is circumstantial evidence?
I mean, I don't really know which circumstantial evidence you're saying. Like mathematics is circumstantial.
If you look at a piece of computer code, right?
Yes.
Let's say you have an algorithm that says do this and then do that, and then do this and then do that, and do that in a pattern. But if this happens, then do something else, right? Essentially, what you described as the Earth being in the Goldilocks zone of the perfect position away from the sun, the perfect distance away from the sun, what would be that condition? So, like, if you look at the universe as a whole, nothing would essentially exist as something if it was truly chaotic. Nothing would actually exist. The universe is made out of algorithmic-like, I don't want to say an algorithm, but algorithmic-like patterns and conditions which allow other algorithms and things to come about.
Would that open up the possibility that we're inside of a computer simulation?
Yeah, I mean, kind of. So if we're inside of a computer simulation, if you want to go with that, and we can't actually create anything. The only thing we're doing is simulating things and discovering things that already exist, right? Does that mean that there has to be one ultimate creator that maybe they're not, this creator isn't active, but they put the building blocks and this algorithm into play? Would you say that there's enough circumstantial evidence to say that, yeah, this is enough evidence to take me from a 0 to a, let's say, 0.5?
It's enough circumstantial evidence for me to be open to that possibility.
Okay, I respect that. Thank you.
But I always look at it as a scale of -1, 0, and 1. And so really, for me, it's either I believe in a God or I don't. And currently, I don't. So I have to be able to flip that switch to a 1.
Okay, fair enough.
Or a -1.
I would say I'm on the other side of that. Like, I grew up Jewish, but then I just totally threw that out the window.
Sure.
For a really long time. And then when I started getting into science a little bit, I kind of became a theist because of that. Because
Sure.
It just kind of made a little bit more sense to me. And then I just took a leap of faith. Now, could I confidently say that I believe in God? Do I confidently say that I believe in God? Yes. Do I admit that is solely built on faith? Also, yes. But I also believe that there's enough circumstantial evidence for us to lean towards one side than the other. And I stand by that.
So do you think that there's any God figure that humans have discovered that you think fits the bill?
No, I don't. I think that civilizations all throughout history have kind of come to the same conclusion in one way or another, whether it's just through basic spirituality or it's just believing in deities all throughout history. But I don't believe that we've actually I don't believe that we've actually been able to figure out, like, haha, yes, this is the right creator.
Discover the right one, yeah. And I'm completely open to the possibility. I mean, as most people know, like, and I'm sure you know more about mathematics than I do, and I know that because I suck at math. So I'm heavily dyslexic, so me and math do not get along. But I respect mathematics because it is the foundation for everything that we can explain. So
Right.
the rules that we have in play, that are around us that govern the universe as we see fit, those rules, obviously, if they had a creator that created those rules, it is possible then, yeah, I would believe that there is a God that put that into place. And I'm actually probably more inclined to believe that someone put that into place or something put that into place and then let it roll and has been hands off. That I'm more apt to believe than Christianity or Islam or something else. But it is also possible. Don't you think it's also possible too, though, that our universe could be infinite, never needing a creator?
I don't think that it's infinite because okay, so when we first hypothesized the Big Bang, we thought that the universe would be slowing down. But then when scientists observed it, they actually saw that it was speeding up. So if something is, honestly, the only correct answer that I can give you is I don't know. However, if I had to guess, I would say that it is finite because it's either expanding or given some certain conditions that might be met at some point in the future, or the way that we perceive the future, it could start to collapse on itself. And that in and of itself, the fact that it has a beginning and the fact that most scientists agree that there has to be a beginning, it doesn't make sense to me that it would have no end because the end is the beginning.
But we're thinking of it as a linear time scale.
Right,
and so
exactly.
The beginning of our universe would have been the beginning of our time as we see it.
Yes, exactly, because time and space are one.
Right. So we created the time. So the time was created. Yeah. So but the materials and the universe as it is could have been here, obviously was here before the Big Bang, in my opinion. But if it's infinite, then it creates a new universe and a new time scale.
Right. So then if it's infinite, then there is without a doubt no God. And if that is ever proven that the universe is infinite, I probably will become an atheist. However, I don't believe that the universe is infinite. I do believe that we live in a finite time space that we're confined. Just the fabric of time itself, the time space itself. And the fact that we don't know what's behind it, and the fact that we don't really understand the universe. Again, we're leaning towards it's probably finite, but no one can definitively say. So the only correct answer is the same answer that any logical person would give to the theological question, which is I don't know.
Well, do you think that the God that would have done this is infinite?
That is a great question, and that question is just so intimidating. I honestly don't know. I want to say yes, just because, but I feel like it's so biased because I do consider myself Jewish, but also just because it's just something I grew up with. I'm also ethnically Jewish, and it's just so, but I also grew up in this culture where it was just drilled into me that God is here and there and everywhere and omnipotent. So I don't know. I don't know. I want to say yes, but I feel like that's probably driven by a bias.
Well, we just have to wait a few trillion years and we can find out.
Yeah, unless we raise a baby without the concept of God until they're an adult. And until they're 22 years old, and we ask them that question, we won't know objectively.
We just need a child that we can
Yeah.
shelter for 22 years. Well, I appreciate you calling in.
Sure.
I'll let you say if you have any last words.
No last.
No.
Thank you.
But yeah, you're gonna give me some things I got to talk about in my mind tonight.
Okay, I'm happy to hear that.
Yes.
Have a good night.
All right, guys. So for those of you watching on the YouTube live stream, we're gonna say goodbye. I appreciate you guys checking it out. And Pasta, go ahead and roll that outro.